The bitter wind cut through Clara Whitmore's traveling cloak as the stagecoach lurched to a halt in Windridge, Wyoming territory. Through the frost-covered window, she glimpsed a collection of weathered buildings huddled against the February cold, their facades as unwelcoming as the gray sky above. This was to be her new home, a far cry from the cobblestone streets and gaslit evenings of Boston. Clara clutched the worn letter in her gloved hand, the paper soft from countless readings during the 3-week journey west. E. Collins had written with a steady hand, promising a good life on his ranch, modest but honest work, and companionship in this frontier land. She had responded to his advertisement for a mail-order bride with cautious hope, driven more by necessity than romance. The scandal that had driven her from Boston, her father's debts and subsequent suicide, had left her with few choices. "End of the line, miss," the driver called down, his voice rough as sandpaper. "Windridge ain't much, but it's all we got out here." Clara gathered her meager belongings, 2 carpetbags containing everything she owned, and descended into the muddy street. The few townspeople visible stopped their business to stare. She felt their eyes like brands on her skin, taking in her city clothes, her pale complexion unmarked by prairie sun, her hands too soft for this hard country. The general store's proprietor, a severe woman with steel-gray hair, watched from her doorway. "Another mail-order bride," Clara heard her mutter to a companion. "Wonder how long this one'll last." Clara lifted her chin, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She had survived worse than suspicious glances. She would survive this too. The saloon across the street disgorged a group of men, their laughter dying as they noticed her. One whistled low. Another elbowed his companion. Clara kept her eyes fixed on the hotel sign swaying in the wind, refusing to acknowledge their crude interest. "Miss Whitmore?" The deep voice made her turn. The man who approached seemed carved from the very mountains that loomed beyond the town, tall and broad-shouldered. He wore a long duster over work clothes that had seen better days. A week's worth of stubble shadowed a jaw that might have been handsome, if not set in such harsh lines. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray as winter storm clouds, holding shadows that spoke of profound loss. "Yes," she managed. "I'm Clara Whitmore. Rhett Collins." He didn't smile, didn't offer his hand, just studied her with those penetrating eyes as if weighing her against some invisible scale. "Got your trunk?" "Just these bags." She indicated her carpet bags, acutely aware of how little she brought to this new life. He nodded, taking them without comment. His hands were large, scarred, the hands of a man who knew hard labor. When his fingers brushed hers in the exchange, she felt the calluses that ridged his palms. "Wagons this way." She followed him through the mud, trying to avoid the worst of the puddles. He didn't slow his pace or look back, moving with the sure stride of someone who belonged to this unforgiving land. The wagon waited at the edge of town, practical, unadorned, much like the man himself. He helped her up with impersonal efficiency, his touch brief but surprisingly gentle, as they left Windridge behind. Clara stole glances at her intended husband. The letter writer had seemed warm, even poetic in places. This man appeared to have been hewn from granite, all sharp angles and stony silence. The ranch lay 5 miles from town, though it felt like 50 in the jolting wagon. Snow began to fall as they traveled, fat flakes that clung to her eyelashes and melted on her cheeks. Rhett drove with steady competence, occasionally clicking his tongue at the horses, but offering no conversation. Clara filled the silence with her own observations. The landscape was both beautiful and terrifying, endless sky meeting endless earth, broken only by distant mountains and scattered stands of pine. No buildings for miles, no neighbors, no escape if things went badly. She pushed the thought away. She had made her choice. "There," Rhett said suddenly, pointing with his chin. The ranch house materialized from the gathering dusk like something from a fairy tale, though not the pleasant kind. Built of logs and chinked with mud, it squatted low against the earth as if bracing against the wind. Smoke rose from the chimney, the only sign of warmth in this cold place. A barn stood to one side, along with various outbuildings in varying states of repair. "It ain't much," Rhett said. The first hint of emotion, was it embarrassment, coloring his voice. "But it's solid. Built it myself." "It's fine," Clara said quickly. It wasn't what she had imagined, but she hadn't come west for luxury. He pulled the wagon up to the house and helped her down. This time his hands lingered a moment longer at her waist, steadying her. Up close, she could see lines carved by sun and sorrow around his eyes, a thin scar along his left temple. He smelled of leather and wood smoke and something indefinably male. Inside, the house proved as spare as its exterior suggested. One large room served as kitchen, dining, and living space. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a few pieces of handmade furniture arranged before it. Everything was clean but austere, speaking of a man who lived for function rather than comfort. "Bedrooms through there." He indicated a door. "I'll bunk in the barn till we're properly married." The consideration surprised her. "That's very considerate, Mr. Collins." Something flickered in his eyes. "Rhett. And I ain't no saint. Miss Whitmore. Just think it's proper, is all." She explored while he brought in her bags. The bedroom held a brass bed with a quilt that had seen better days, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and little else. But the window looked out on the mountains, and she could imagine waking to that view might compensate for other lacks. When she returned to the main room, he had stoked the fire and stood before it, staring into the flames, in profile. She could see the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched as if fighting some internal battle. "Hungry?" he asked without turning. "Yes, actually." She hadn't eaten since morning, too nervous about meeting her intended. He moved to the stove with surprising grace for such a large man, heating what looked like stew. They ate in silence at the rough-hewn table, the only sounds the crackle of fire and howl of wind outside. Clara tried several times to start conversation, asking about the ranch, the weather, the town. He answered in monosyllables, volunteering nothing. As she helped clear the dishes, he seemed startled by the offer. Their fingers touched again over a plate. This time, she felt him freeze, saw his jaw tighten. He pulled away as if burned. "I'll show you the morning chores tomorrow," he said brusquely. "Best get some rest now." At the bedroom door, she turned back. He stood silhouetted against the fire, a dark figure full of mysteries she couldn't begin to unravel. "Good night, Rhett." "Night, Miss Whitmore." Clara lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the wind batter the walls and his footsteps fade toward the barn. She had expected awkwardness, certainly, but not this distance, this careful space he maintained between them like a wall of ice. Through the thin walls, she could hear him moving in the barn, settling for the night. What had she gotten herself into? This harsh land, this silent man who looked at her with eyes full of ghosts. The letter writer had spoken of companionship, of building a life together. But the man who had met her seemed to want nothing more than another pair of hands for work. Still, she had noticed things. The way he'd helped her from the wagon, the consideration of giving her the bedroom, the quick flash of something, concern, when she'd shivered in the cold. Perhaps beneath that granite exterior beat a heart merely well guarded. Clara pulled the worn quilt to her chin, breathing in the scent of lye soap and something else, a lingering trace of the woman who had made this quilt, who had once called this house home. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing this strange new world in white. She had come west for a new beginning, looking around the spare room, feeling the weight of Rhett Collins's unspoken sorrow even from across the yard. She wondered if she had found one, or simply traded one set of troubles for another. Time would tell. In this unforgiving land, she sensed, truth had a way of revealing itself whether one wished it or not. 3 weeks had passed since Clara's arrival at the Collins ranch, and she had settled into a rhythm of sorts. Each morning, Rhett would knock softly on her door before dawn, and she would find coffee already brewing, biscuits warming in the oven. They worked side by side through the days, feeding livestock, mending fences, hauling water, but rarely spoke beyond what necessity demanded. It was while cleaning the small desk in the corner that Clara found them, a bundle of letters tied with twine, shoved beneath some ledgers. Her heart recognized the handwriting immediately. It matched the letters she had carried across the country, but as she read the signature on the envelope, her blood ran cold. Elijah Collins. Not he. Collins, as in Edgar or Edward or Edmund, as she had assumed. Elijah. The next letter was dated 6 months prior, describing plans to stake a claim at the goldfields near South Pass. The last letter, nearly a year old, spoke of promising prospects and a plan to return by Christmas. Christmas had come and gone. No Elijah. Clara sank into the rickety chair, letters trembling in her hands. She had answered the wrong man's advertisement, or rather, she had assumed wrongly. The romantic phrases, the talk of companionship, that had been Elijah, not this stone-faced Rhett who treated her presence like a business arrangement. The door banged open, bringing cold wind and Rhett himself. He stopped short seeing her at the desk, his eyes immediately going to the letters in her hands. Something shifted in his expression, not surprise exactly, but a kind of weary recognition. "Found them, did you? These are from Elijah," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Your brother?" "My younger brother." Rhett moved to the stove, his back to her. "He's been gone near on a year now. Gold fever got him. But I answered his advertisement. I thought—" Clara stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "You knew I was coming for him?" Rhett turned then, and she saw something raw in his eyes before he shuddered it away. "Letter came addressed to E. Collins. Figured it was for Edgar. That's me, Edgar Rhett Collins. Go by Rhett since Pa was Edgar too." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "By the time I worked out the confusion, you were already on your way. Seemed cruel to send you back to nothing." "Cruel?" Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "What's cruel is letting me believe, letting me think." She couldn't finish, couldn't voice the small hopes she had begun to nurture despite his coldness. "Elijah's likely dead," Rhett said bluntly. "Mine shaft collapse, Indian raid, claim jumper's bullet. Take your pick. Men who go chasing gold rarely come back." His voice roughened. "I wrote to the mining camps. No word." Clara pressed her palms against the desk, trying to steady herself. She had traveled thousands of miles for a ghost. "Why didn't you tell me immediately?" "Planned to, but that first night, you looked so—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "You needed a place. I needed help with the ranch. Seemed practical to let it be." Practical. The word tasted bitter. "Is that what I am to you? A practical solution? Better than being thrown to the wolves in town. You've seen how they looked at you. Unclaimed woman in a place like this." He shook his head. "I offered you honest work, protection, roof over your head. That's more than most get." Clara wanted to rage at him, to throw the letters at his feet and demand he take her back to town immediately. But the truth of his words stopped her. She had seen the hungry looks, heard the whispers. A woman alone in Windridge would face worse than loneliness. "I'll take you to town come morning," Rhett said quietly. "Stage runs twice a week. You can head back east or try your luck in California. I'll stake you the fare." "With what money?" Clara asked. She had seen the careful way he counted coins, the patches on his clothes. "You can barely keep this place running." His shoulders stiffened. "I'll manage, always have." She studied him in the lamplight. This man who had taken her in under false pretenses yet offered to bankrupt himself, sending her away. There was honor in him, buried deep beneath the granite exterior. And loneliness too. She recognized it like a familiar friend. "What if I stayed?" The word surprised them both. Rhett's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "Why would you do that?" Clara gestured at the frost-covered windows, the snow that had begun falling again. "Winter's no time to travel, and you do need help." She lifted her chin. But we do this proper. I work for room and board, nothing more. Come spring, if your brother hasn't returned, I'll move on. And if he does return? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. If Elijah returned, what then? Did she honor the original arrangement with a man she had never met? The romantic letters had painted a picture of a dreamer, an optimist. Nothing like the pragmatic man before her. We'll face that if it comes, Clara said finally. Rhett nodded slowly, but she caught something in his expression. Disappointment. Relief. It passed too quickly to read. That night, as she helped to prepare supper, the atmosphere was different. The truth lay bare between them now, and oddly, it eased some tension. Rhett actually answered when she asked about the ranch's history, though his responses remained brief. Bought it 5 years back, he said, cutting salt pork into the beans. After, he stopped, that familiar tightening around his eyes. After I lost my family. Clara's hands stilled on the cornbread she was mixing. Family. Not parents or siblings, but family. Wife. Children. The quilt on the bed. The curtains at the windows. Remnants of a woman's touch she had noticed but not understood. I'm sorry, she said softly. He nodded once, sharp, and changed the subject to tomorrow's chores. Later, as they sat by the fire, him working on a harness, her mending a shirt, Clara found herself stealing glances at him. In the flickering light, she could see past the harsh exterior to the man beneath, the careful way he worked the leather, patient and precise, the absent way he rubbed his shoulder, probably aching from the day's labor, the way his expression softened when he thought she wasn't looking, grief writing itself across his features. How did he hear about mail-order brides? She asked suddenly. Elijah, Rhett's hands paused. Newspaper in town. Fool boy was always reading about faraway places, dreaming of adventure. Something that might have been fondness flickered across his face. Said he'd strike it rich, come back, build his bride a proper house with glass windows and a pump in the kitchen. You miss him. He's all the family I got left. Rhett resumed working, but his movements were less certain. Ma died birthing him. Pa followed her 3 winters back. Just me and Elijah after that, running this place together, till gold got in his head. Clara heard what he didn't say, that Elijah had left him alone with memories and too much work for one man, that winter nights were long when you had no one to share them with. I could teach you, she said impulsively. When he looked at her blankly, she clarified. To read better. I saw you struggling with the ledgers. I taught school for a while in Boston. Don't need charity. It's not charity, it's... She searched for words he would accept. It's practical. Ranch needs good records kept. He considered this, pride warring with pragmatism. Maybe, he said finally. Come winter evenings when there's time. It was a small victory, but Clara felt it like sunlight breaking through clouds. They sat in companionable silence until the fire burned low, each lost in thought. When she rose to retire, Rhett stood too. For a moment they were close in the small space, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, smell the leather and wood smoke that clung to him. Clara, he said, and it was the first time he had used her given name. What I said about practical, that came out wrong? He struggled, this man who seemed to ration words like precious coins. You're a good woman, deserved better than deception, even unintended. We all deserve better than we get sometimes. Clara replied softly. Doesn't mean we can't make the best of what we have. Something shifted in his eyes then. A recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits, of shared loss, of possibilities neither had expected. The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell. Sleep well, Miss Whitmore? Clara, she corrected gently. If we're to work together through winter, might as well use given names. The ghost of what might have been a smile touched his lips. Clara, then, good night, as she lay in bed. listening to the wind howl around the eaves. Clara thought about letters and mistakes and the strange turnings of fate. She had come west for one man and found another. Found a life harder than she had imagined, but perhaps more honest too. Outside, snow continued to fall, sealing them into this small world of daily chores and evening silences and careful distances maintained. But something had shifted tonight. The truth had freed them from pretense, and in that freedom, Clara sensed the possibility of something neither had dared hope for. Not love, perhaps. Not yet, but understanding. The scream that tore through the night had Clara bolting upright, heart hammering. Through the thin walls, she heard thrashing, another cry, raw and anguished. Without thinking, she grabbed her shawl and rushed out into the main room. Rhett's form twisted on his makeshift bed by the dying fire, caught in the grip of nightmare. In the dim glow, she could see sweat beading his forehead, his hands clenched as if fighting invisible demons. "No, Sarah, the baby!" The words were guttural, torn from somewhere deep. Clara hesitated only a moment before kneeling beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Rhett, wake up! You're dreaming!" He jerked awake with a gasp, eyes wild and unfocused. For a heartbeat, he looked through her, still trapped in whatever horror held him. Then awareness crashed back, and with it, a vulnerability that made her chest tight. "Clara," his voice was hoarse. What are you?" "You were having a nightmare," she said softly, not moving her hand from his shoulder. Through his thin shirt, she could feel him trembling. "About Sarah." He flinched as if she'd struck him, turning his face away, but he didn't pull from her touch. In the dying firelight, she saw the glitter of moisture on his cheeks and politely looked away, giving him that dignity. "How?" The question was barely a whisper. "You called her name, and—" She hesitated, then forged ahead. "And the baby." A sound escaped him then. Half laugh, half sob. 3 years, 3 years, and I still see their faces when I close my eyes." Clara settled more comfortably on the floor, her hand sliding down to rest on his arm. "Tell me, why?" The word was harsh, defensive. "Because carrying it alone is killing you." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless, which somehow made it worse. "Went to town for supplies. Sarah begged to come. Said she was going stir-crazy with the baby keeping her up nights, but little Emma was colicky. And I thought—" He swallowed hard. "Thought they'd be better off resting at home. Safe." Clara tightened her grip on his arm, already dreading what came next. Band of men came through. Deserters from the army, maybe, or just drifters. Looking for food, money, whatever they could take. His jaw worked. Sarah tried to protect Emma, fought them. He couldn't finish, but he didn't need to. Clara could fill in the horrific blanks. She moved without thought, gathering him against her as the dam finally broke. He resisted for a heartbeat. This man who held himself so rigid, then collapsed into her embrace. She held him as he wept. Great, shuddering sobs that seemed to tear from the very depths of him. Her own tears fell silently as she rocked him like a child, murmuring wordless sounds of comfort. His arms came around her, crushing her close as if she were an anchor in a storm-tossed sea. Time lost meaning. The fire died to embers. Still she held him, this broken man who had shown her nothing but stone, now revealed as flesh and blood and devastating grief. When the storm passed, he pulled back, embarrassment replacing anguish. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "Don't!" Clara caught his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Don't apologize for being human, for loving them so much that losing them nearly destroyed you." He stared at her, something shifting in those storm-gray eyes. "How do you understand? Because I lost everything too, different circumstances. But loss is loss." She dropped her hands but didn't move away. "My father took his own life when his debts caught up. The scandal, Mother's family cast us out. She died of shame as much as pneumonia, leaving me with nothing but the clothes on my back and a reputation in ruins." Now it was Rhett who reached out, his calloused hand covering hers. That why you answered Elijah's advertisement? Only respectable option left. She managed a weak smile. Spinster schoolteacher with a ruined name doesn't have many choices. They sat in silence, hands linked, sharing the quiet understanding of those who had survived devastating loss. I found them, Rhett said suddenly. When I got home, Sarah was... He stopped, shook his head. She'd hidden Emma in the root cellar, saved her, even dying. But Emma was too small, too cold. Doctor said she lived maybe an hour after. Oh, Rhett. Clara's free hand went to her heart. Buried them together under the oak out back. Sarah loved that tree. Said it reminded her of home in Missouri. He looked toward the window, though darkness obscured any view. Some mornings I stand there and I swear I can hear her laughing. Hear Emma crying for her morning feed. That's love, Clara said softly. Not madness. Love. He looked at her then with such raw gratitude that her breath caught. Everyone else says I should move on. Find a new wife. Start over. Like they were cattle to be replaced. People say foolish things when faced with grief they don't understand. Clara squeezed his hand. You'll carry them always. But maybe, someday, the memories will bring more comfort than pain. You believe that? I have to. She thought of her father's laughter, her mother's gentle hands. Otherwise, what's the point of loving anyone? The question hung between them, weighted with new meaning. Because somewhere in these weeks of shared work and quiet evenings, something had shifted. The careful distance they maintained had narrowed without either quite noticing. Rhett seemed to realize it the same moment she did. Their hands were still linked, their bodies close in the dying light. She could feel the warmth of him, see the pulse beating in his throat. His eyes dropped to her lips, and she felt an answering pull low in her belly. But the moment was too fragile, too wrapped in grief and vulnerability. They pulled apart by mutual, unspoken agreement. You should get back to bed, he said roughly. Cold night. Clara rose, joints protesting the time spent on the hard floor. At her door, she paused. Rhett, thank you for trusting me with their memory. He nodded once, sharp, already rebuilding his walls. But they would never be quite as high again. The next morning, she woke to find fresh wildflowers on the kitchen table, purple asters that must have required searching to find in the snow. No note, no acknowledgement, but she understood. They were from Sarah's grave, a sharing of something precious. They worked side by side that day, comfortable in shared silence, when she caught him rubbing his shoulder, an old injury. She'd learned, from building the barn alone. She wordlessly heated water and made a compress. He accepted it without protest, their fingers brushing in the exchange. That night, she made apple pie from the dried fruit in the pantry, remembering he'd mentioned Sarah's talent for baking. His eyes went wide at the first bite, and she saw him blink rapidly before gruffly declaring it passable. Small kindnesses, carefully offered and received, the foundation of something neither dared name. Days blended together. She taught him letters in the evening, patient with his fumbling. He showed her how to read weather signs, to predict storms by the way the cattle huddled. They developed a rhythm of shared labor and quiet companionship. The anniversary of Sarah and Emma's death came with the first true blizzard. Clara woke to find Rhett gone, tracks leading toward the oak tree despite the howling wind. She waited, keeping coffee hot, soup simmering. When he finally stumbled in, half frozen, she said nothing, just helped him out of ice-crusted clothes and wrapped him in quilts by the fire. She would have liked you, he said suddenly, staring into the flames. Sarah, you're like her that way, seeing the best in people, even broken ones. You're not broken, Clara said firmly. Bent, maybe, scarred, but not broken. He looked at her then with such intensity she felt exposed, seen in ways that went beyond flesh. Sometimes, watching you work, hearing you hum in the kitchen, I forget, for a moment, I forget they're gone. Then I remember, and the guilt. There's no guilt in living. Rhett, Sarah wouldn't want you entombed with her. How can you know that? Because she hid her baby rather than herself, because she loved you enough to want you safe, even if she couldn't be. Clara moved closer, drawn by his pain. Honor them by living, not just surviving. He caught her hand, pressed it to his cheek. His stubble was rough against her palm, his skin warm. I don't know how, then we'll learn together. The words hung between them, a promise and possibility wrapped in one. Outside, the blizzard raged, but inside their small shelter, something new took root, fragile as spring growth, but stubbornly alive despite the winter surrounding them. Spring came slowly to Wyoming territory, fighting winter for every inch of ground. Clara had learned to read the signs, the way ice began to web across puddles rather than freeze solid, how the cattle grew restless in their pen, the subtle shift in light that promised longer days ahead. She had also learned to read Rhett Collins, the way his shoulders relaxed when she hummed while cooking, how his eyes lingered on her hands when she mended his shirts, the careful distance he maintained that seemed to shrink with each passing week. They had built new routines around their shared life, morning coffee together before dawn, discussing the day's work. Evenings by the fire where she continued teaching him letters while he showed her how to repair harnesses and mend tools. Sunday afternoons spent on small improvements, new shelves for the kitchen, a better gate for the chicken coop she had convinced him to build. It was during one of these projects that everything changed. Higher, Clara directed. Standing back to either shelf Rhett was mounting. It needs to be level with the others. Any higher and you'll need a ladder to reach it, he grumbled, but adjusted accordingly. I'm not that short. She moved closer to point where she wanted it. Right there. Perfect. He marked the spot, then reached for the hammer. The shelf slipped. Clara lunged forward to catch it the same moment he did, and suddenly they were pressed together, the forgotten shelf clattering to the floor. Time suspended. Clara was acutely aware of every point of contact, his chest against hers, his hands braced on either side of her against the wall, the warmth of his breath on her face. She looked up to find him staring at her with such intensity it stole her breath. Clara! Her name was rough on his lips, part warning, part plea. She should step away, should remember all the reasons this was complicated, Elijah's unknown fate, their practical arrangement, the ghosts that still walked between them. Instead, she lifted her hand to his cheek, feeling the familiar rasp of stubble. I know, she whispered. I know all the reasons we shouldn't. Do you? His voice was strained. Do you know I wake up reaching for you? That I watch you at the stove and have to stop myself from… He cut off, jaw clenching. From what? Instead of answering, he lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, soft at first, almost hesitant. Then Clara made a small sound in her throat, and something snapped. Rhett's arms came around her, crushing her against him as the kiss deepened. Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, holding on as fire raced through her veins. This was nothing like the chaste pecs she had witnessed at Boston socials. This was raw need, months of suppressed longing pouring out in a single moment, when they finally broke apart. Both breathing hard, reality came crashing back. Rhett stepped away so quickly Clara had to catch herself against the wall. I shouldn't have. We can't. He ran a hand through his hair, agitated. You're meant for Elijah. Elijah's not here, Clara said quietly. And I'm not some package to be delivered to whoever placed the order. But if he comes back, do you want him to come back? The question hung between them, dangerous in its honesty. Rhett's silence was answer enough. That afternoon, they worked in strained quiet, hyper-aware of each other. Every accidental brush of hands sent sparks through Clara. Every shared glance held weight. The very air between them seemed charged. They were in the old barn, clearing space for the spring supplies. When the skies opened, rain poured down in sheets, turning the yard to mud in minutes. They ran for shelter, but the damage was done, both soaked to the skin by the time they made it inside the storage shed. Storm came up fast, Clara said unnecessarily, teeth chattering. Rhett was already shrugging out of his drenched shirt. Need to get dry before you catch cold. He paused, seeming to realize the intimacy of the situation. I'll turn my back. But Clara was tired of propriety, tired of dancing around what sparked between them. We're both adults, Rhett, and it's nothing you haven't seen on washing day. Still, her fingers trembled as she worked the buttons of her bodice. The wet fabric clung stubbornly, and she made a frustrated sound. Then warm hands covered hers. Let me help. Rhett's voice was low, rough. He worked the buttons free with surprising gentleness, his knuckles brushing her skin and leaving fire in their wake. Clara forgot to breathe as he pushed the sodden fabric from her shoulders, his hands lingering on her arms. You're shaking. His thumb stroked over her skin. Not from cold. Their eyes met, held. The rain pounded on the roof, sealing them into this moment outside of time and consequence. Rhett's hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. Tell me to stop, he whispered. Instead, Clara rose on her toes and kissed him. This time there was no hesitation. Rhett's arms banded around her, lifting her against him as he backed her against the wall. Clara's hands explored the planes of his chest, feeling the thundering of his heart that matched her own. Every touch was revelation, every kiss deeper than the last. When his lips found her throat, she gasped his name. He stilled, breathing ragged against her skin. Clara! God, Clara! He pulled back to look at her, conflict clear in his eyes. If we don't stop now. She knew what he was saying, knew they stood at a precipice from which there was no return. But she also knew she had been moving toward this moment since the night she held him while he wept, since she first saw past his walls to the man beneath. I don't want to stop, she said simply. Something broke in his expression, resistance, perhaps, or the last of his noble intentions. He kissed her again, and this time there was promise in it, intent. His hand spanned her waist, and Clara felt delicate and powerful all at once. Thunder crashed overhead as he lifted her, her back against the rough wall, her legs coming around him instinctively. The position brought them impossibly closer, and Clara understood with crystalline clarity what happened next, what they both wanted. The house, Rhett managed, voice strained. We should... No. Clara tightened her hold on him. Here, now. I'm tired of shoulds and propriety and careful distances. He searched her face, perhaps looking for doubt or regret, finding none. He kissed her with renewed fervor. What followed was a fumbling of remaining clothes, soft gasps and groans, the sweet madness of two people who had denied themselves too long. They came together with desperate need, Clara crying out at the intensity of it, Rhett stilled, pressing his forehead to hers, letting her adjust. Then they were moving together, finding rhythm as old as time. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one between them. Afterward, they held each other on a bed of horse blankets, skin cooling in the afternoon air. Clara traced patterns on Rhett's chest, feeling more content than she had in years. What are you thinking? She asked when the silence stretched too long. That I'm going to hell. But his arms tightened around her. For this, for not regretting it. He pressed a kiss to her hair. For wanting to do it again. For wishing... What? Wishing Elijah would stay gone. The admission seemed torn from him. What kind of man wishes his own brother dead? Clara pushed up to look at him. You don't wish him dead. You wish him to have found happiness elsewhere, as you've found it here. Have I? His hand came up to trace her face. Found happiness. Haven't you? Instead of answering, he kissed her again, slow and deep, when they finally dressed and ran through the lessening rain to the house. Everything had changed. The careful boundaries they had maintained were shattered, impossible to rebuild. That night, Rhett didn't head to the barn. When Clara emerged from her room in her nightgown, she found him standing uncertain by the fire. I could still... He gestured vaguely toward the door. Clara held out her hand. Come to bed, Rhett. He came to her then, gathering her close as if she might disappear. They made love again in the brass bed. Slower this time, learning each other properly. Clara discovered the scar on his ribs from a horse's kick, the sensitive spot behind his ear that made him groan. He mapped her body with work-rough hands that could be impossibly gentle, whispering her name like a prayer. They lay entwined afterward, watching shadows dance on the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring complications, guilt, perhaps, and the specter of Elijah's possible return. But tonight, Clara felt only rightness, as if all the mistakes and losses had led them to this moment. "No regrets?" Red asked, as if reading her thoughts. Clara turned in his arms, memorizing his face in the lamplight. "None. You." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Only that I can't marry you proper, can't give you what you deserve." "You give me what I need," Clara corrected. "That's worth more than any piece of paper." But even as she said it, she knew the world wouldn't see it that way. Come morning, they would have to face the reality of their choice. For now, though, she pressed closer to his warmth and let the sound of rain on the roof lull her towards sleep, safe in the arms of a man she had never meant to love. The morning after brought regret, but not in the way Clara had expected. Rhett withdrew into himself, barely speaking at breakfast, his shoulders rigid with tension. When their fingers brushed over the coffee pot, he jerked away as if burned. "We need supplies," he said abruptly. "I'll go to town. I'll come with you." Clara kept her voice steady despite the hurt blooming in her chest. "No." The word was sharp. Then, softer. "Better if you stay. The talk." He didn't need to finish. The talk would be vicious if anyone suspected what had transpired between them. Clara watched him harness the horses with quick, angry movements, and her heart sank. One perfect night, and already he was pulling away. She spent the morning in furious activity, scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing, beating rugs with perhaps more force than necessary, anything to keep from thinking about the distance already growing between them. It was past noon when she heard horses approaching, too early for Rhett's return. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and went to the door, then froze. A stranger sat atop a bay mare, but something about him was achingly familiar. The same dark hair as Rhett, though longer and unkempt. The same strong jaw, though thinner, marked by hardship. And when he lifted his head, she saw eyes the same storm gray, but lit with a warmth Rhett's rarely showed. "You must be Clara," the man said, and his voice held traces of Rhett's rumble but lighter, younger. "I'm Elijah Collins." The world tilted. Clara gripped the door frame, mind reeling. He was supposed to be dead. They had grieved him, moved past him, built something new in his absence. And now here he sat, trail-worn but very much alive. "Elijah," she managed. "We thought," Rhett said. "I know." He dismounted with evident stiffness, favoring his left leg. "Cave-in at the mine. Was trapped for days. Then spent months recovering with a Mexican family who found me. Couldn't travel. Couldn't send word." He offered a rueful smile. "Not much of a hero's return. I'm afraid." Clara found herself moving forward without conscious thought. This was the man whose letters she had carried across the country, whose words had painted pictures of a life together. Up close, she could see the resemblance to Rhett, but also the differences. Where Rhett was granite, Elijah seemed made of lighter stone, sandstone perhaps, worn smooth by water and wind. "You're here," was all she could say. "I'm here." He studied her with those familiar, unfamiliar eyes. "You're even prettier than I imagined, though I suppose that sounds forward, considering we've never properly met." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks, but not from his compliment, from shame, from the knowledge of what she'd done with his brother just hours before in the bed they might have shared. "Rhett's in town," she said quickly. "He'll be back soon. Would you like to come in, rest?" Elijah's smile widened. "I'd like that. Been a long road home." She led him inside, acutely aware of every sign of the life she and Rhett had built. Their coffee cups from breakfast, still sitting close together. The shirt she'd been mending. Rhett's shirt. The rumpled quilt on Rhett's makeshift bed by the fire. because he'd never returned to the barn after that night. If Elijah noticed, he said nothing, sinking into a chair with obvious relief. Clara busied herself making coffee, needing the familiar ritual to steady her nerves. "Tell me everything," Elijah said. "Your journey here, how you've been managing." Rhett's letters were sparse, just said you'd arrived safely. Rhett wrote to you. 3 letters to the mining camp. Took me ages to get them. Elijah accepted the coffee gratefully. He said you were helping with the ranch, that you were... He paused, something shifting in his expression. That you were a good woman. High praise from my taciturn brother. Clara's hands trembled as she set down the pot. "Elijah, there's something you should know." The door burst open. Rhett stood silhouetted against the afternoon light, face frozen in shock at the sight of his brother. The supplies in his arms crashed to the floor. "Eli?" "Hello, brother." Elijah struggled to his feet, and then they were embracing. Rhett crushing his younger brother against him with desperate force. "We thought you were dead," Rhett said roughly. "A year without word." "I know. I'm sorry. God, Rhett, I'm so sorry." Elijah pulled back, gripping Rhett's shoulders. "But I'm here now. I made it back." Clara watched the reunion with her heart in her throat. Joy at Elijah's survival warred with dread at what it meant. Rhett's eyes found hers over his brother's shoulder, and the look in them, guilt, sorrow, resignation, told her everything. They spent the afternoon in strange domesticity. Elijah regaled them with tales of his ordeal, the months of recovery, the kindness of strangers. He was a natural storyteller, painting pictures with words in a way that reminded Clara of his letters. She found herself liking him despite herself. His easy laugh, his optimism even after hardship, the way he drew Rhett out of his shell. But she also felt the gulf between what was and what might have been. When Elijah smiled at her, she saw a stranger. When he spoke of their future together, the dreams from his letters, she felt only hollowness, because her heart had already been claimed by another, one who sat across from her now, careful not to meet her eyes. As evening fell, the question hung unspoken but heavy in the air. Sleeping arrangements, expectations, the future. "I'll bed down in the barn," Elijah offered, seeming to sense the tension. "Don't want to presume anything. We've got time to get acquainted proper." "No," Rhett said abruptly. "You'll take the house. Actually," Clara interrupted, surprising them both. "I need air. I'll take a walk." She fled before either could protest, needing space to think. The evening was cool, spring fighting winter's last gasps. She found herself at Sarah's grave without conscious intention, the oak tree budding with new life. "I don't know what to do," she whispered to the wooden cross. "How can I hurt him? He came back for me, came through hell for the promise of a life together, but I can't unfeel what I feel for Rhett. Can't pretend my heart isn't already given." The wind rustled new leaves, nature's only answer. Clara stayed until full dark, watching stars emerge one by one. When she finally returned, she found Rhett waiting on the porch. "Elijah's asleep," he said quietly, exhausted from the journey. They stood in awkward silence. All the easy intimacy of recent weeks evaporated. Finally, Rhett spoke, voice carefully controlled. "He's a good man, better than me. He'll treat you right, give you a proper life. Rhett, it's settled." He cut her off, jaw tight. "What happened between us? It was a mistake, my mistake. You came here for him, and now he's here. Simple as that." "Nothing about this is simple," Clara said fiercely. "You can't just decide, yes, I can." He turned to face her fully, and she saw the walls rebuilding, higher than ever. "I won't steal my brother's bride, won't betray the only family I have left, not for anything." "Not even for love," the word hung between them, admitted at last. Rhett's composure cracked, anguish flashing across his features before he shuddered it away. "Especially not for that," he said roughly. Love's not enough to build a life on. Ask Sarah. It was cruel, using his dead wife as a weapon, and they both knew it. Clara felt tears sting her eyes, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing them fall. So, that's it? We pretend nothing happened? I marry your brother and we all live happily on this ranch together? You'll marry him and leave, Rhett corrected. Elijah's got plans. California. Maybe somewhere fresh. Away from... He gestured vaguely between them. Away from temptation. He meant away from the constant reminder of what they'd shared and lost. Clara wanted to rage at him, to demand he fight for her, for them. But she saw the resolution in his stance, the noble stupidity of a man determined to do what he thought was right. I need time to think, she said finally. Rhett nodded once, sharp. Elijah's a patient man. He'll wait. A pause, waited with meaning. He's good at waiting. Unlike you. Clara heard, unlike the man who'd taken her in a storage shed like she was someone to be ashamed of. The unfairness of it burned. But she was too tired to fight any more tonight. She went to her room, their room, for one glorious night, and lay in the bed that still smelled of him. Through the thin walls, she could hear Rhett settling by the fire, Elijah's soft snores from exhaustion. 3 hearts in one small house, none of them where they truly belonged. Clara pressed her face into the pillow and finally let the tears come, grieving for a love that had bloomed in the wrong season, with the wrong man, under the wrong stars. Tomorrow, she would have to choose. But tonight, she mourned what was already lost. Days passed in excruciating politeness. Elijah courted Clara with gentle persistence, bringing her wildflowers, helping with chores, sharing stories of his dreams for their future. He was everything his letters had promised, kind, optimistic, devoted. And Clara felt like she was dying inside. Rhett had become a ghost in his own home. He left before dawn, returned after dark, spoke only when necessary. The teaching session stopped. The comfortable silences vanished. When their eyes met across the dinner table, he looked through her as if she were a stranger. He's hurting, Elijah said one afternoon, finding Clara crying quietly by the wash basin. Has been since Sarah died. I'd hoped. He touched her shoulder gently. I'd hoped having you here might help him heal. The irony was so sharp, it cut. Clara turned away, unable to bear his compassion. Clara, Elijah's voice was soft. I'm not blind. I see how you look at each other, how you don't look at each other. Something happened while I was gone. She couldn't deny it. Couldn't lie to this good man who deserved better. Yes. Do you love him? The simple question undid her completely. Yes. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice held no anger, only sadness. And he loves you. He won't admit it, won't betray you. My noble fool of a brother. Elijah sank onto the porch step, suddenly looking older than his years. Did you know I was there, the day they died, Sarah and Emma? I was supposed to watch them while Rhett went to town, but I wanted to go fishing instead. Told him I had important business at the mine. Clara's breath caught. Elijah. He never blamed me, never said a word, but I knew. If I'd been here. He shook his head. I ran to the goldfields because I couldn't face his forgiveness, couldn't face what my selfishness had cost him. It wasn't your fault. Those men would have found an empty house if I'd done my duty. Elijah looked up at her, eyes bright with unshed tears. I took his family through carelessness. I won't take his chance at love through stubbornness. Clara sank down beside him, hope and dread warring in her chest. What are you saying? I'm saying my brother has suffered enough for both our lifetimes. He took her hand, squeezed gently. You're a good woman, Clara. Any man would be lucky to have you, but you're not mine to have, are you? I wanted to be, she whispered. When I read your letters, I thought, you thought you were getting the writer, but Rhett helped with those letters. The prettiest phrases, the ones that made you come all this way? Those were his words. I just copied them down. The revelation stole Clara's breath. All those romantic passages she'd treasured. The promises of companionship and understanding. They had been Rhett's heart on paper. Even then. That evening, Elijah announced his plans at dinner. "I'm heading back to California. Got word of opportunities in Sacramento. Good jobs for men who know mining." Rhett's fork clattered to his plate. "You just got home. This isn't my home anymore. Brother, hasn't been for a while." Elijah's gaze was steady. "I came back for the wrong reasons. To reclaim something I thought I wanted. Something I thought I deserved. But some things aren't meant to be. Eli, I'll need supplies for the journey. Maybe you could ride to town with me tomorrow. Help me prepare." Elijah's tone was casual, but Clara heard the intent beneath. He was giving them time alone, one last gift. That night, unable to sleep, Clara slipped out to the porch. The moon was new, the stars brilliant in the clear sky. She heard the door open behind her, but didn't turn. "You should be asleep," Rhett said quietly. "So should you." He came to stand beside her, careful to leave space between them. They stood in silence, watching the night, feeling the weight of endings and beginnings. "He's leaving because of us," Rhett said finally. "He's leaving because he loves you, because he wants you to be happy." "Happy?" Rhett's laugh was bitter. "I don't even remember what that feels like." "Liar." Clara turned to face him. "I've seen you happy. When you taught me to mend harnesses and I got it right first try. When we worked together to save that calf in the blizzard. When you woke up beside me that morning and smiled before you remembered to be guilty." "Clara." "No." She stepped closer, forcing him to see her. "You've decided what's best for everyone without asking what we want. You've made yourself judge and jury of what's right, but you're wrong. Rhett, sending me away with Elijah would have been the real betrayal. Of him, of me, of us. There is no us." But his protest was weak, his eyes betraying the lie. "Isn't there?" Clara reached up, cupping his face the way she'd had that night by the fire. "Then tell me you don't love me. Look me in the eye and say it." He caught her wrists, whether to push her away or pull her closer. She couldn't tell. "What I feel doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters." She rose on her toes, bringing their faces close. "Elijah knows that. Why can't you—" For a heartbeat, she thought he would kiss her. His grip on her wrists gentled, thumbs stroking over her pulse points. Then they heard footsteps, and Elijah appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, though his small smile suggested otherwise. "Just wanted to say, be happy. Both of you. You've earned it." He retreated inside, leaving them frozen in their almost embrace. Rhett released Clara's wrists, stepping back. "He's my brother," Rhett said, but the protest sounded hollow now. "He's your brother who wants you to live again." Clara pressed her advantage. Who knows that honoring the dead doesn't mean joining them? Something shifted in Rhett's expression, a crack in the wall, letting light through. "If we do this, yes? I need to do it right." He took a shaky breath. "I need to say goodbye properly. To Sarah and Emma, to let them go. And you need to be sure. This life, this place, it's hard. Harder than what Elijah could offer you in California." "I don't want California. I don't want easy." Clara's voice was fierce. "I want Sunday mornings fixing fences together. I want winter evenings by the fire, teaching you to read while you teach me to survive. I want to wake up beside you for whatever years we're given. Even knowing I come with ghosts? We all have ghosts. Rhett. The difference is whether we let them drive us or learn to live alongside them." He was quiet for so long she feared she'd lost him. Then, slowly, he opened his arms. Clara didn't hesitate, flowing into his embrace like water finding its course. "I love you," he said against her hair, the words torn from somewhere deep. "God help me. I've loved you since you stood up to that shopkeeper who tried to cheat you, since you made that terrible coffee the first morning and drank it anyway. Too proud to admit it was awful." Clara laughed against his chest. Tears and joy mingled. "It was awful. The worst." He pulled back to look at her. But you've gotten better. At coffee, at everything. At making this place feel like home again. Our home? If you'll have it, have me. Vulnerability flickered across his features. I can't promise to be easy to live with. The nightmares still come. The guilt. Clara silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her certainty into the touch. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, she smiled. I'm not looking for easy, remember? I'm looking for real, for true, for you. This time when he kissed her, it was different from the desperate passion in the storage shed. This was a promise, deep and sure, a claiming and a surrender all at once. When they finally went inside, Elijah was pretending to sleep, but Clara caught his smile in the lamplight. Tomorrow, they would see him off with love and gratitude. Tomorrow, they would visit Sarah's grave together, laying the past to rest with honor. But tonight, Clara led Rhett to their bedroom, truly theirs now, and they came together not in stolen moments, but in chosen certainty. Each touch was a vow, each whispered word a foundation stone for the life they would build. When dawn broke through the windows, finding them entwined, it felt like a blessing, a new day for new beginnings, hard won but all the sweeter for the struggle. The news spread through Windridge like wildfire in dry grass. Clara Whitmore, the mail-order bride, was living in sin with the wrong brother. The Collins boy who'd sent for her had left town, and she'd stayed behind like a common trollop. By the time Clara ventured into town for supplies, the whispers followed her like dust devils. Shameless, Mrs. Henderson hissed to her companion as Clara passed, playing one brother against the other at the general store. Mr. Garrett served her with cold efficiency, slamming her purchases down with unnecessary force. That'll be $2, cash. I have credit, not anymore. His eyes were hard as flint. Can't extend credit to folks of questionable character. Bad for business. Clara's cheeks burned, but she kept her chin high as she counted out the precious coins. Behind her, she heard someone spit on the floor. Jezebel, a woman muttered, luring decent men into sin. The bell above the door chimed, and sudden silence fell. Clara didn't need to turn to know Rhett had entered. She felt his presence like a shield at her back. Problem here. Garrett? Rhett's voice was dangerously quiet. The shopkeeper's face paled slightly. No problem. Just explaining our new credit policy. Funny, don't recall hearing about any new policy at the last town meeting. Rhett moved to stand beside Clara, his hands settling possessively on her lower back. Maybe you'd like to explain it to me. Outside. Now, Rhett, no need for... The lady's money not good enough for you. Rhett's voice dropped lower. Because if that's the case, maybe I need to take my business elsewhere. Been meaning to try that new store in Willow Creek. Garrett's face went from pale to red. The Collins Ranch was one of his biggest accounts. That's not necessary. Perhaps I was hasty. Perhaps you were. Rhett gathered Clara's purchases with one arm, the other still protective around her. My wife and I will be going now. The word wife rippled through the store. Clara saw Mrs. Henderson's mouth drop open. Mr. Garrett's eyes bulge. Wife, Mrs. Henderson sputtered. Who performed? That's our business, Rhett said curtly. Good day. He guided Clara out, but not before she heard the explosion of gossip behind them. On the street, more faces turned their way. Some curious, others openly hostile. You shouldn't have said that, Clara murmured. Now they'll know it's not true. Let me worry about that. His jaw was tight with anger. Nobody talks to you that way. Nobody. They'd barely reached the wagon when Reverend Morrison intercepted them, his face grave beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Mr. Collins, Miss Whitmore. He emphasized her unmarried title. I think we need to speak. Nothing to speak about. Reverend, I disagree. The minister's eyes were kind but firm. This situation cannot continue. You're living in sin, setting a terrible example for our community. I cannot, in good conscience, allow it. Then it's good nobody's asking for your conscience. Rhett said, Rhett. Clara touched his arm, feeling the tension vibrating through him. Perhaps we should listen. Thank you, my dear. Reverend Morrison smiled at her. I'm not without sympathy for your unusual circumstances. I know young Elijah left you in a difficult position, but there are proprieties to observe. If you truly wish to make a life together, I would be happy to perform a proper ceremony. No. Rhett's response was immediate and harsh. We don't need your blessing. The Reverend's face hardened. Then I'm afraid I must ask Miss Whitmore to leave town. The Women's Christian Society has funds to help fallen women return east. Fallen? Rhett stepped forward, and Clara had to grab his arm to hold him back. You calling her fallen? What else would you call a woman who lives with a man outside the bonds of matrimony? The Reverend's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath. She cannot stay here, corrupting our... He never finished the sentence. Rhett's fist connected with his jaw, sending the minister sprawling in the dirt. Gasps went up from the gathering crowd. Rhett! Clara dropped to her knees beside the dazed Reverend, checking his injury. Are you all right, Reverend Morrison? I'll have you arrested. The minister wheezed, struggling to sit up. Assault on a man of God. You insulted my woman. Rhett flexed his bruised knuckles. Lucky that's all you got. Sheriff Palmer pushed through the crowd, his weathered face grim. What's the trouble here? He struck me. Reverend Morrison pointed an accusing finger. Unprovoked. Wasn't unprovoked. Old Pete called from the crowd. Heard the whole thing. Reverend was saying ugly things about Miss Clara. Still can't go around punching ministers, the sheriff said, but there was a hint of sympathy in his eyes. Rhett, you'd best come with me. Let things cool down. No. Clara stood, placing herself between Rhett and the sheriff. If you arrest him, you arrest me too. I'm the one living in sin. After all, the corrupting influence. Miss Clara. Mrs. Collins, she corrected firmly. And I'm not leaving this town, and neither is my husband. We've broken no laws. No laws but God's. Someone shouted from the crowd. Clara whirled to face them, fury giving her courage. Which of you is without sin? Which of you has the right to cast stones? Her eyes found familiar faces. Mrs. Henderson. Didn't your eldest have to marry quick last spring? Mr. Garrett. Don't you water down your whiskey? Judge not lest ye be judged. Isn't that also God's law? Uncomfortable shifting rippled through the crowd. Rhett moved to stand beside her, solid and protective. We're not asking for your approval. Clara continued. We're not asking for anything but to be left in peace. We work hard, pay our debts, help our neighbors when needed. If that's not enough, then perhaps it's your hearts that need examining. Not ours. Silence fell, broken only by the Reverend's groans as he got to his feet. Sheriff Palmer looked between all parties, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. Nobody's getting arrested today, he decided. Reverend, might be best if you head on home. Get that jaw looked at. Rhett? Clara, maybe you folks should head back to the ranch too. We have business in town, Rhett said stubbornly. Not today you don't. The sheriff's tone brooked no argument. Go home, let tempers cool. We'll sort this out proper-like later. They drove home in tense silence, Clara acutely aware of curious eyes following their progress. Only when they were well clear of town did Rhett speak. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have hit him. Made things worse. You were defending me. Clara linked her arm through his. Though I wish you'd used words instead of fists. Words don't work with men like that. His jaw was still tight with anger. Self-righteous hypocrite. Half the marriages in this town started with necessity, not ceremony. They were nearly home when they saw the smoke. Black, billowing clouds rising from the direction of their ranch. Rhett whipped the horses into a gallop, Clara clutching the seat as they careened down the road. The barn was fully engulfed, flames licking at the sky. The horses were out, thank God, running in panicked circles in the far pasture. But the structure itself was lost. along with their winter feed, tools, everything. The water barrels. Rhett leaped from the wagon, but Clara caught his arm. It's too late. It's gone. She pulled him back as a section of roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. At least the house is safe. They stood watching their barn burn, arms around each other. Clara knew this was no accident. Someone had wanted to send a message, to drive them out. I'll kill them, Rhett said quietly. Whoever did this? No? Clara turned in his arms, forcing him to look at her. That's what they want, for you to become the violent man they paint you as. We won't give them that satisfaction. Then what do we do? The defeat in his voice broke her heart. We can't rebuild without help, and nobody in town will. Rhett? Clara? A voice called from the road. They turned to see Elijah riding up, leading a string of pack horses. Behind him, incongruously, rode old Pete and several other men from neighboring ranches. Heard there was trouble, Elijah said, swinging down from his horse. His eyes took in the burning barn, his brother's clenched fists, Clara's soot-stained face. Came to help. Thought you were heading to California, Rhett said roughly. Got as far as Willow Creek when Pete found me. Told me what happened in town. Elijah's face was grim. This is my fault. If I hadn't left, this isn't anyone's fault but the cowards who lit the match. Clara interrupted. She's right. Old Pete spat tobacco juice. Some of us don't hold with burning folks out just 'cause they don't follow every rule in the good book. You're good neighbors. That matters more than ceremonies. More riders appeared. The Schultz family from the next valley. Young Tom Baker, who Rhett had helped with his well last summer. Even Widow Martinez, who ran the boarding house. Not many, but enough. Enough to show that not everyone in the territory had turned against them. We'll help you rebuild, Elijah said simply. All of us, starting tomorrow. Rhett's voice was thick when he spoke. Why? Because you're my brother. Because Clara's right. Judgment isn't ours to give. Because, Elijah smiled sadly, because everybody deserves a chance at happiness, even if it doesn't look the way folks expect. As the barn collapsed into embers and their neighbors set up camp in the yard, Clara felt something shift. They had lost a building, but gained something more valuable. Allies. People willing to stand with them against prejudice and hatred. That night, as they lay listening to the voices of friends keeping watch, Rhett pulled her close. Still want this life? He asked. It's only going to get harder. Clara thought of Mrs. Henderson's sneers, the Reverend's condemnation, their barn in ashes. Then she thought of Elijah's sacrifice, old Pete's gruff support, neighbors who chose compassion over conformity. It's our life, she said firmly, worth fighting for. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, surrounded by the proof that kindness could triumph over hatred, Clara allowed herself to hope. They would rebuild, not just the barn, but their place in this community. It would take time, patience, and strength they didn't know they possessed. But they would do it together. And that, she was learning, made all the difference. The morning dawned clear and bright, as if nature herself had decided to bless their union. Clara stood before the cracked mirror in their bedroom, wearing her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had survived the journey from Boston. It wasn't white silk or imported lace, but Rhett had said she looked beautiful in it, and that was enough. Ready? Elijah appeared in the doorway. Dressed in his cleanest shirt and fresh-shaved, he would give her away, a brother's final gift to the couple who had found each other through loss and mistake and fate. As ready as one can be for a wedding with no church, no minister, and half the town hoping will burn in hellfire. But Clara smiled as she said it. After everything they'd endured, a simple ceremony among friends felt more sacred than any cathedral service. Outside, their makeshift congregation had gathered in the shade of Sarah's oak tree. Old Pete stood ready to officiate, as a former ship's captain. He had the legal right. Even if Reverend Morrison had refused to acknowledge it, the Schultz family had brought wildflowers, transforming the space into something almost magical. Widow Martinez had even managed a cake, small but decorated with careful pride. But it was Rhett who stole Clara's breath. He stood beneath the oak in his father's wedding suit, altered to fit his broader frame. His hair was neatly combed, his face clean-shaven, but it was the look in his eyes that made her heart race. Wonder, love, and something that might have been peace, as if he'd finally given himself permission to be happy. Elijah offered his arm. "Shall we?" The walk felt both eternal and far too quick. Their friends, for that's what these neighbors had become, smiled as she passed. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by this triumph of love over adversity. When they reached Rhett, Elijah placed Clara's hand in his brother's with gentle ceremony. "Take care of her," he said softly. "Both of you take care of each other." "Always," Rhett promised, his fingers tightening around Clara's. Old Pete cleared his throat, pulling out a worn book. "Dearly beloved, we gather here under God's own sky to witness something special. Not just a wedding, but a choice. These two have chosen each other despite the odds, despite the talk, despite every reason the world gave them to walk away. If that ain't love worth celebrating, I don't know what is." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Beside her, Rhett stood steady as the mountains, but she could see emotion working in his jaw. "Edgar Rhett Collins," Pete continued, "do you take this woman as your lawful wedded wife, to have and hold, in sickness and health, in barn fires and blizzards, in good times and when the whole damn town, pardon my language, turns against you?" A surprised chuckle rippled through the gathering. Rhett's lips twitched before he answered, strong and clear. "I do. Clara Whitmore, do you take this man as your lawful wedded husband, to stand beside him when the path is rough, to build a life from ashes if need be, to love him even when he's too stubborn to love himself?" "I do," Clara said, her voice carrying across the yard. "The rings?" Rhett pulled out 2 simple bands, not gold, but crafted from silver dollars hammered and shaped by his own hands during the long evenings while the barn was being rebuilt. He'd shown them to Clara last night, almost shy, explaining he'd wanted to make something himself, something that came from their life together. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Rhett spoke the words he'd memorized. "With this ring, I thee wed. Let it be a symbol not just of my love, but of my promise, to stand with you against whatever comes." Clara repeated the gesture, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the ring on his calloused finger. "With this ring, I thee wed. Let it be a reminder that you are no longer alone, that where you go, I go, and your people shall be my people, by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming and the Almighty himself," Pete announced, grinning now. "I pronounce you husband and wife. Rhett, you may kiss your bride." Their lips met to cheers and applause, and Clara tasted salt, whether from her tears or his. She couldn't tell. When they parted, she saw the same joy reflected in his eyes that filled her heart to bursting. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pete called out, "I present Mr. and Mrs. Collins." The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. They feasted on dishes brought by neighbors, danced to Tom Baker's fiddle playing, and for a few hours, the weight of judgment and hardship lifted. Even the location felt right, here beneath Sarah's tree, as if the past was blessing their future. As the sun began to sink, Elijah pulled them aside. "I've got a wedding gift for you." He handed Rhett a sealed envelope. "Don't open it now. Wait until everyone's gone. Eli, you've already done enough. It's not from me alone." Elijah's smile was mysterious. "Let's just say some folks in town aren't as hard-hearted as they seem. There are more who support you than oppose you. They're just quieter about it." As twilight fell and their guests began to depart, each taking a moment to offer personal congratulations, Clara felt a deep contentment settle over her. This wasn't the wedding she'd imagined as a girl. No church bells, no society reception. It was something better. A true community of souls who understood that love mattered more than propriety. Finally, only family remained. Elijah hugged them both, promising to visit when he could, then mounted his horse for the journey to California, this time with their blessing and without guilt. They watched until he disappeared over the ridge, a piece of their hearts going with him. Ready to go home. "Mrs. Collins," Rhett asked, pulling her close. "I am home," Clara replied, and meant it. Inside their house, their home, Rhett lit the lamps while Clara opened Elijah's envelope. Inside was a bank draft that made her gasp, along with a letter in multiple hands. "What is it?" Rhett looked over her shoulder. "Listen," Clara read aloud. "To Mr. and Mrs. Collins, we the undersigned wish to contribute to the rebuilding of your ranch. While we may not all agree with how your union began, we recognize true love when we see it, and we believe in second chances. Consider this our wedding gift and apology for those who let fear speak louder than compassion. Signed, Rhett." There must be 20 names here. The banker, the school teacher, even... She looked up in amazement. Even Mrs. Henderson. Rhett sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "That's enough to rebuild the barn properly, maybe even add on to the house. A real kitchen pump," Clara said dreamily. "Windows for the bedroom. A proper porch. A room for children," Rhett added quietly, then looked at her uncertainly. "If you want..." Clara went to him, settling onto his lap in a way that would have scandalized proper society but felt perfectly natural now. "I want everything with you. Children, grandchildren, a lifetime of mornings waking up beside you." He kissed her then, deep and sure, and she felt the last of his walls crumble. When he carried her to their bed, it was as husband and wife, blessed not by a church but by something deeper, the courage to choose love over fear, forgiveness over bitterness, hope over resignation. Later, as they lay entwined in the darkness, Rhett traced lazy circles on her bare shoulder. "Do you remember what you wrote in that first letter? The one answering Elijah's advertisement?" "I said I was looking for a new beginning," Clara recalled. "A chance to build something real. You found it," he said softly. "We both did, just not how we expected." Outside, a gentle breeze stirred the new leaves on the oak tree, and Clara could almost imagine Sarah's blessing on the wind. They had all found peace, the living and the dead, the present and the past, woven together into something stronger than any of them alone. "I love you, Rhett Collins," she whispered into the darkness. "And I love you, Clara Collins," he replied. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days after." As sleep claimed them, Clara's last thought was of the rightness of it all. She had traveled across a continent for one man and found another. She had been rejected by society and embraced by true friends. She had lost a barn and gained a community. Most of all, she had discovered that love, real love, was worth every trial, every judgment, every challenge thrown their way. Their story would be told in Windridge for generations. The mail-order bride who came to the wrong brother and found her destiny. Some would tell it as a cautionary tale, others as a romance. But Clara and Rhett would simply live it, day by day, season by season, building their life together on the firm foundation of chosen love. In the morning, they would rise and work side by side, as they had from the beginning. But tonight, on their wedding night, they simply held each other and dreamed of all the tomorrows to come. And in that simple wooden house on the Wyoming frontier, two hearts that had known loss and sorrow finally found their way home. Thank you for joining us around the campfire for this tale of love found in the most unexpected places. Where are you listening to this story from? Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles, just as Clara and Rhett connected across the vast frontier. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of courage, romance, and adventure from the American frontier. Share your thoughts about Clara and Rhett's journey. Did you believe in their love? What would you have done in Clara's place? Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own sunset.